Today is the sixth in our series of 10 spotlights on Black composers. Previous spotlights included Samuel Coleridge Taylor, Florence Price, Scott Joplin, Nathaniel Dett, and Margaret Bonds. Today we spotlight William Grant Still, a Black American composer of over 200 works, including 5 symphonies, 4 ballets, 9 operas, over 30 choral works, plus art songs, chamber music, and spiritual arrangements. William Grant Still was born on May 11, 1895 in Woodville, Mississippi. He started violin lessons in Little Rock at the age of 15. William taught himself to play the clarinet, saxophone, oboe, double bass, cello, and viola. At 16 years old, he graduated as class valedictorian from M.W. Gibbs High School. William's mother wanted him to go to medical school, so he began a Bachelor of Science degree program. But instead of focusing his energy on his anatomy homework, William conducted the university band, learned to play more instruments, and started to compose. Not surprisingly, he didn't finish his science degree. Instead, he began studying at the Oberlin Conservatory of Music. To make a little money, William worked for the school, assisting the janitor along with a few other small jobs. But he was still financially struggling. When one of the professors asked Still why he wasn't studying composition, Still told him honestly that he couldn't afford to. Seeing promise in the young Still, Professor George Andrews agreed to teach him composition without charge. William Grant Still quickly found himself very busy with composing, arranging, performing, recording, and conducting. He was equally proficient composing in classical and popular styles. For a time, he toured with the legendary band leader W.C. Handy, arranging some of Handy's hits like St. Louis Blues. In the 1930s, Still worked as an arranger for radio shows as well as for films, including the 1936 film Pennies from Heaven, starring Bing Crosby, and 1937's Lost Horizon, starring Jane Wyatt. Of all of Still's compositions, his symphonies were the most popular during his lifetime, and they are his most performed works to this day. His Symphony No. 2 was first performed in 1937 by the Philadelphia Orchestra under the direction of Leopold Stokowski. His symphonic works were performed internationally by the Berlin Philharmonic, the London Symphony, the Tokyo Philharmonic, and the BBC Orchestra. On October 28, 1931, Still's landmark First Symphony, dubbed the Afroamerican Symphony, was performed by the Rochester Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Howard Hanson. During today's service, you'll be hearing 2 movements from the Afro-American Symphony. This work, along with a few other works by William Grant Still, were recorded as part of a project called the Black Composers Series, which I discovered this past week. This series, which was produced and released starting in 1974 and continuing through 1978, consists of 10 volumes of music, highlighting 2 centuries of compositions by Black symphonic writers. A new remastered compilation of all 10 volumes was released in 2018. In total, the project includes over 400 minutes of music by 18 Black composers and arrangers. Several of the featured composers were alive when these recordings were made, including today's featured composer William Grant Still, who died in 1978, just as the project was wrapping up. Thomas Jefferson Anderson, another composer featured in the series, said about the project that he, quote, hoped that these recordings would bring the Black composer out of the shadows of classical music, unquote. As I eagerly made my way through the 10 volumes of extraordinary music in this collection, I couldn't help but notice that of the 18 Black composers and arrangers included in the series, not a single woman composer is featured. These recordings were made in the years just following the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment and Roe v. Wade. How is it possible that no women composers were included? As we know from previous spotlights in our Black Composers series right here at Chalice, there were plenty of talented Black women composers that could have been included. Florence Price and Margaret Bonds, just to name 2. So for me, this compilation of music does 2 things. On one hand, it represents an important and historically groundbreaking effort to celebrate and honor Black symphonic composers, which, needless to say, was not something that was already happening in America in the 1970s. On the other hand, this project highlights a glaring example of inequality by way of the complete omission of any women composers, reminding us of how much work we still have to do. I highly recommend this gem of a collection, and I hope that we can both appreciate its accomplishments and acknowledge its shortcomings. I think a Women Composers series is in order, don't you? Stay tuned.